Cleveland, Ohio, in the spring of 2017, was a city of contrasts, where the past and present collided in a gritty dance of survival and hope. The Cuyahoga River snaked through its industrial heart, its waters catching the steel-gray sky, while neighborhoods pulsed with life, some blooming with new cafes and art galleries, others clinging to existence with boarded-up homes and cracked sidewalks. In Hough, a neighborhood scarred by history but fierce with pride, Sheila Watkins, a 52-year-old seamstress, walked the same route every morning to her modest tailor shop, stitch by stitch. Her steps were measured, her eyes sharp, and her heart carried a quiet strength forged by decades of loss, love, and unyielding determination. Sheila's life was a tapestry of hard-won threads. She'd raised 3 children alone after her husband Marcus was killed in a factory accident 15 years earlier, a tragedy that left her widowed at 37. Her eldest, Tanya, now 30, was a teacher in Columbus, shaping young minds with the same patience Sheila had given her. Darius, 27, worked construction in Pittsburgh, his calloused hands a mirror of his father's. Lena, the youngest at 21, was studying art at Cleveland State University, her vibrant paintings a splash of color in Sheila's otherwise muted world. Stitch by stitch, a narrow storefront with a creaky door and a sewing machine older than Lena, was Sheila's lifeline. It paid the rent, kept food on the table, and tethered her to Hough's heartbeat. She mended suits for pastors, hemmed prom dresses, and patched jeans for kids whose parents couldn't afford replacements. Her hands, calloused yet nimble, wove stories of resilience, each stitch a defiance of hardship. Hough was a neighborhood of raw beauty and stubborn hope. Children played basketball on courts with bent rims, their laughter rising above the drone of traffic. Corner stores sold candy, cigarettes, and dreams in equal measure, while churches stood sentinel on every block, their steeples piercing the skyline like prayers. Sheila knew Hough's struggles. Poverty, violence, the long shadow of the 1966 riots, but she also knew its soul. She'd grown up here, in a shotgun house with a sagging porch and a backyard garden where her mother, Esther, grew collards and tomatoes. Esther had been Hough's unofficial matriarch, feeding neighbors, mending clothes, and teaching Sheila that kindness was a currency stronger than money. Though Sheila could have moved to a safer suburb, Hough was home. She walked its streets with purpose, nodding to shopkeepers, tossing coins to the saxophone player on 79th Street, and keeping an eye out for those who needed a hand. Stitch by stitch was Sheila's sanctuary, a haven of order in a chaotic world. The shop smelled of fabric softener, old wood, and the faint tang of metal from her sewing needles. Its walls were a patchwork of spools of thread, pinned patterns, and faded photos. Marcus grinning at a church picnic, Tanya in her graduation cap, Darius holding his first hammer, Lena sketching in the backyard. A small radio played gospel on Sundays, jazz on weekdays, and a kettle sat ready for tea, its whistle a comforting constant. Customers were more than clients, they were family. Mrs. Johnson, a choir director, brought her robes for alterations and gossip about the deacon's new girlfriend. DeAndre, a barber from the shop next door, needed his aprons hemmed and swapped stories about his toddler's antics. Miss Clara, an 80-year-old widow, came as much for Sheila's company as for mending, her trembling hands clutching a cup of chamomile. Sheila listened to their joys and sorrows, offered advice, and sometimes slipped a repaired garment to someone who couldn't pay. Esther's voice echoed in her mind. "Give what you can, Sheila. It comes back tenfold." One chilly April morning, as a fine mist draped Hough and the sidewalks shimmered from overnight rain, Sheila walked her usual route. A wool scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. The air carried the scent of wet asphalt, blooming lilacs, and the faint smoke of a distant chimney. The neighborhood was stirring. Kids trudging to school with backpacks bigger than their torsos, delivery trucks rumbling down Euclid Avenue, a stray dog sniffing at a trash can. As Sheila turned on to East 66th Street, her boots splashing in shallow puddles, she noticed a boy, maybe 12 or 13, crouched by the curb. He was rummaging through a pile of discarded bottles and cans, his movements quick and practiced. His clothes were threadbare, A hoodie with holes at the elbows, jeans too short at the ankles, sneakers held together with silver duct tape. He worked with focus, stuffing cans into a plastic bag, his breath puffing in the cold. Sheila slowed her pace, her maternal instincts kicking in. She'd seen kids scavenging before, often to help struggling families, but something about this boy, his small frame hunched against the wind, the determined set of his jaw, tugged at her heart. She approached, her voice gentle but clear. "Hey, young man, you okay out here?" The boy startled, his head snapping up. His face was smudged with dirt, but his eyes were sharp, wary, assessing her like a cornered animal. "I'm fine," he said, his voice low, edged with defiance. "Just collecting cans." Sheila nodded, keeping her distance to avoid spooking him. "It's cold for that. You got a coat?" He shrugged, turning back to his bag. "Don't need one." Sheila wasn't fooled. She'd raised 3 kids and knew pride when she saw it, a shield against vulnerability. "What's your name?" she asked, stepping closer, her scarf fluttering in the breeze. He hesitated, his fingers pausing on a crumpled can. "Jamal," he muttered, barely audible. "I'm Sheila," she said, offering a smile. "I got a shop up the street, stitch by stitch. If you get too cold, come by, all right? I'll make you some tea." Jamal didn't respond, but he gave a small nod, his eyes flicking back to the cans. Sheila watched him for a moment, her heart heavy with questions she didn't ask. Who was he collecting for? Where were his parents? She turned and continued to her shop, the boy's image lingering like a shadow. All morning, as Sheila hemmed a wedding dress and patched a pair of overalls, Jamal stayed on her mind. She thought of Tanya at that age, stubborn and fiercely independent, and Darius, who'd once collected bottles to buy his first baseball glove. Whoever Jamal was, he was someone's child, out in the cold, while Sheila sat in her warm shop. The thought gnawed at her. By noon she couldn't stand it. She packed a small bag, a peanut butter sandwich from her lunch, an apple, and a pair of wool gloves she'd knitted for Lena but hadn't sent. On her way home, she scanned East 66th for Jamal. She found him a block over, still collecting cans, his fingers red from the chill, his bag heavier now. "Jamal," she called, holding out the bag. "This is for you. No arguing." He froze, eyeing the bag with suspicion. "I don't need charity," he said, his voice sharp but wavering. "It ain't charity," Sheila said firmly, her hands on her hips. "It's lunch, and those gloves'll keep your hands from freezing. Take 'em, or I'll stand here all day and I'm too old for that." Jamal's lips twitched, almost a smile, and he took the bag, his fingers brushing the paper. "Thanks," he mumbled, shoving the gloves in his pocket without looking at her. Over the next few weeks, Sheila made a point to look for Jamal. He was a regular on East 66th, scavenging cans most mornings, sometimes with a smaller boy she guessed was a brother or cousin. She started bringing him small things, a scarf she'd found at the thrift store, a pair of socks, a thermos of soup. Each time Jamal resisted, his pride a wall, but Sheila's persistence wore him down. One day she caught him on a warmer morning, sitting on a stoop with his bag of cans. "You ever gonna tell me why you're out here?" she asked, half teasing. He kicked a pebble, his voice low. "My grandma's sick. Cans help pay for her medicine." Sheila's heart sank, but she didn't push. "You're a good kid, Jamal. Your grandma's lucky to have you." He shrugged, but his eyes softened, and Sheila knew she'd reached him, even if just a little. One rainy May morning, Sheila saw Jamal again, his hoodie soaked through, his sneakers squishing with every step. He was struggling to carry a heavy bag of cans, his small frame bending under the weight. Sheila's patience snapped. "That's it," she said, marching over, umbrella in hand. "You're coming with me." Jamal looked alarmed, stepping back. "What? I ain't done nothing." "I know," Sheila said, softening her tone. "But you're soaked and I got a heater in my shop. Come on, I'm not leaving you out here." Reluctantly, Jamal followed, dragging his bag of cans, the plastic rustling against the wet pavement. Inside, stitch by stitch, the shop was warm, the radio playing Ella Fitzgerald's smooth voice. Sheila handed him a towel and a mug of chamomile tea, then pointed to a chair by the radiator. "Sit. Let me see that hoodie." Jamal hesitated but handed over the wet garment, his shoulders hunched. Sheila examined it. Holes at the elbows, a ripped seam, fabric so thin it was nearly transparent. "This ain't a hoodie, it's a suggestion," she said, shaking her head. She rummaged in a box of second-hand clothes she kept for emergencies and pulled out a navy jacket, slightly big but sturdy, with a fleece lining. "Try this." Jamal's eyes widened, his fingers brushing the fabric. "For me?" "For you," Sheila said, her voice firm but kind. "And don't give me that no charity mess. I'm fixing this hoodie too, so you'll owe me a favor." While Jamal sipped his tea, his hands warming around the mug, Sheila patched the hoodie, her needle flying through the fabric. She also slipped a pair of gloves she'd knitted into the jacket's pocket, a small surprise for later. When she handed him the repaired hoodie, Jamal's face softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through. "Thanks, Miss Sheila," he said, the miss a first, his voice barely above a whisper. "Anytime," she said, ruffling his hair, which he dodged with a grin. "Now go home and check on your grandma." That encounter marked a turning point. Jamal started stopping by stitch, not just for food or clothes, but for company. He'd sit in the corner, doing homework on a rickety table or sorting thread spools while Sheila worked. She learned he was 12, lived with his grandmother, Mrs. Lorraine, in a nearby apartment, and had lost his parents years ago, his mother to addiction, his father to prison. Mrs. Lorraine had diabetes and heart issues, and Jamal collected cans to help with her prescriptions, a responsibility that weighed heavily on his young shoulders. His determination reminded Sheila of Darius, who'd taken odd jobs as a teen to help after Marcus's death, and she felt a protective urge she hadn't expected. Sheila's kindness wasn't limited to Jamal. She mended clothes for free for a neighbor who'd lost her job, taught Lena's friend how to sew a skirt, and organized a coat drive at her church, New Hope Baptist, collecting dozens of jackets for Hough's kids. Her shop became a community hub, a place where people swapped stories, shared laughter, and found solace. Mrs. Johnson would linger after dropping off her choir robes, recounting the latest church drama. DeAndre would pop in during his lunch break, his barber clippers buzzing in his pocket. Miss Clara, with her molasses cookies and endless stories, treated Sheila like a daughter. But Jamal was special, a kid who needed more than a jacket, who needed someone to believe in him. As summer approached, Sheila decided to do more. She had an old Singer sewing machine in storage, one she'd used before upgrading to her current model. On a whim, she brought it to the shop and offered to teach Jamal to sew. "It's a skill," she told him, setting up the machine. "You can fix your own clothes, maybe even make some money one day." Jamal was skeptical, his arms crossed. "Sewing's for girls," he said, but his curiosity betrayed him as he watched her thread the needle. "Tell that to the tailors making suits for LeBron." Sheila shot back, and Jamal smirked, scooting closer. Over weeks, Sheila taught him the basics, threading a needle, stitching a straight seam, hemming a pant leg. Jamal was a quick learner, his small hands steady, his focus intense. Soon, he was repairing his own jeans, his stitches uneven but proud. Sheila watched with a swelling pride, seeing a spark in him she hadn't noticed before. "You're good at this," she said one afternoon, inspecting his work. "Keep it up and you'll be better than me." Jamal grinned, a rare, full smile that lit up the shop. "Ain't nobody better than you, Miss Sheila." By June, Jamal was a fixture at Stitch by Stitch. He'd help sweep the floor, run errands to the corner store for thread, or just sit and talk, his voice growing bolder. Sheila learned he loved basketball but couldn't afford to join a team, and he dreamed of being an engineer, building bridges or skyscrapers. She started saving tips in a jar, hoping to buy him a new pair of sneakers for the school year. Real ones, not duct-taped hand-me-downs. Her own finances were tight. Lena's tuition was due, the shop's rent had inched up, and her water heater was on its last legs. But Sheila always found a way to stretch what she had, a skill honed by years of making do. One scorching July day, Jamal didn't show up. Sheila worried, knowing he rarely missed a visit. She asked around the neighborhood, Mrs. Johnson, DeAndre, the kids at the basketball court, but no one had seen him. Her concern grew when a week passed with no word. Finally, she decided to act. She'd overheard Jamal mention his apartment building, a rundown complex on East 79th. On a Saturday morning, she walked there, her heart pounding as she climbed the cracked steps to a door with a broken buzzer. She knocked, and after a long pause, a frail woman with kind eyes and a gray braid answered. "I'm Sheila Watkins," she said. "I'm looking for Jamal. Is he okay?" The woman, Mrs. Lorraine, nodded weakly, leaning on a cane. "He's fine, thank you. He's been helping me. My heart's been acting up, and he won't leave my side." Sheila's relief was tinged with guilt. She'd been so focused on Jamal she hadn't thought about his grandmother, who was clearly struggling. "Can I help?" she asked, her voice soft. Mrs. Lorraine shook her head, her smile tired but warm. "You've done enough, giving him that jacket and food. He talks about you all the time, calls you his shop lady." Sheila laughed, but her heart ached. She left with a promise to check in, bringing a casserole the next day and a batch of cornbread the day after. She included Jamal in her church's youth group, hoping it would give him a sense of belonging, and invited him to a community barbecue, where he shyly joined a pickup basketball game. Slowly, Jamal returned to Stitch by Stitch, his smile a little dimmer but still there, his bag of cans lighter as he spent more time at the shop. Life at Stitch by Stitch continued, a rhythm of work and connection. Sheila mended a choir robe for Mrs. Johnson, taught a sewing class for teens at the community center, and patched a quilt for Miss Clara, who paid with a batch of molasses cookies and a hug. She organized a back-to-school drive, collecting backpacks and pencils for Hough's kids, and started a prayer circle at New Hope Baptist for families hit by layoffs. But Jamal was never far from her thoughts. She saw him growing taller, his voice deepening, and she prayed he'd have a chance to chase his dreams, to build those bridges he talked about. In early October, as Cleveland's leaves turned gold and the air grew crisp with the promise of fall, Sheila was at her sewing machine, working on a prom dress with intricate beadwork, when the shop door burst open. A crowd streamed in. Mrs. Lorraine, leaning on her cane but beaming, Pastor Ellis from New Hope Baptist, his clerical collar gleaming, DeAndre, his barber clippers tucked in his pocket, and a woman Sheila didn't recognize, holding a microphone. Behind them were cameras, their lenses glinting, and a throng of neighbors spilling onto the sidewalk, their faces alight with excitement. Sheila froze, her needle suspended mid-stitch, her heart racing. "What in the world?" she said, standing, her hands smoothing her apron. Mrs. Lorraine stepped forward, her eyes shining with tears. "Sheila Watkins, you've been a blessing to this community, and especially to my grandson. We're here to say thank you." Sheila's mouth went dry, her mind scrambling. "For what?" "I just gave him a jacket." Pastor Ellis raised a hand, his smile wide. "You gave Jamal a jacket, food, a place to feel safe. You taught him to sew, gave him hope when he was carrying too much for a boy his age, and you helped his grandma when we didn't even ask. That's not just anything, Sheila." The woman with the microphone introduced herself as Tanya Green, a reporter from Cleveland's WKYC News. "Mrs. Lorraine reached out to us," she said, her voice clear over the crowd's murmurs. "She's part of Hough Rising, a community organization, and they wanted to honor you. Your kindness inspired them to act, and they've got something special for you." Sheila's eyes darted to Jamal, who stood at the back, grinning shyly, his new sneakers squeaking on the floor. Mrs. Lorraine took Sheila's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "We started a fundraiser," she said. "The whole neighborhood pitched in, churches, businesses, the kids at Jamal's school, even folks who just heard your story. We wanted to fix up your shop and give you something more." Pastor Ellis handed Sheila an envelope, his eyes twinkling. Her hands shook as she opened it, revealing a check for $25,000 and a contract for a full renovation of Stitch by Stitch, new hardwood floors, modern lighting, energy-efficient windows, and a hand-painted sign. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing off the shop's walls, and Sheila's knees buckled. She sank into a chair, tears streaming down her face, the check clutched to her chest. This is too much," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I just gave him a jacket." Jamal stepped forward, his voice clear and steady, cutting through the noise. "You gave me more than that, Miss Sheila. You made me feel like I mattered." The cameras rolled, capturing Sheila's tears and the crowd's joy. Tanya Green explained that Hough Rising had also created a scholarship in Sheila's name for local kids, starting with Jamal, who'd receive funds for a STEM summer camp to nurture his dream of becoming an engineer. Sheila sobbed, overwhelmed by the love pouring in from people she'd known for years and others she'd never met. She'd seen herself as a seamstress, patching holes in clothes and lives, but Hough saw her as a hero, a thread holding the community together. The moment felt like a dream, one Sheila kept expecting to wake from. Mrs. Johnson hugged her, whispering, "You deserve this, baby." DeAndre clapped her shoulder, promising free haircuts for life. Miss Clara, too frail to join the crowd, sent a note via her grandson, calling Sheila Hough's angel. Even Lena, who'd driven up from college, stood in the back, filming the scene with tears in her eyes. Sheila's children had always known their mother's heart, but seeing it recognized by the community was a gift beyond words. The renovation transformed stitch by stitch. By spring 2018, the shop gleamed with polished hardwood floors, bright LED lights, and a new sign that read, "Stitch by Stitch, a community thread," in elegant script. The windows, once drafty, now let in streams of sunlight, illuminating the photos of Sheila's family. Sheila used the $25,000 to buy 2 modern sewing machines and a cutting table, upgrading her tools for the first time in decades. She started a free sewing class for teens, held every Saturday, with Jamal as her assistant, his stitches now as neat as hers. The class grew, drawing kids from across Hough, some dreaming of fashion, others just seeking a safe place. The scholarship in Sheila's name expanded, helping more students attend camps, take AP classes, or buy laptops. Jamal thrived, joining a community basketball team and acing his science classes, his confidence growing with each small victory. Mrs. Lorraine's health stabilized with better medication, and she became a regular at Stitch by Stitch, knitting in a corner while Sheila worked, their conversations a new kind of family. Sheila's life changed in ways she hadn't anticipated. The renovated shop drew new customers, easing her financial strain, and the community's gratitude gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She expanded her church's outreach, organizing food drives and job fairs, and mentored teens in the sewing class, teaching them not just skills but resilience. Lena painted a mural on the shop's exterior, a vibrant scene of Hough's history, with Sheila's hands stitching a bridge, and it became a neighborhood landmark, drawing visitors from across Cleveland. Sheila never forgot that April morning by the roadside. She kept Jamal's repaired hoodie in a box, alongside Marcus's old work gloves and Esther's recipe book, a reminder of where kindness could lead. She framed the check stub, hanging it beside her sewing machine, and told its story to every new student, her voice steady with pride. At New Hope Baptist, she gave a testimony one Sunday, her words simple but powerful. "I gave a boy a jacket, and Hough gave me a future." Years later, in 2021, Jamal graduated high school, earning a scholarship to study engineering at Case Western Reserve University. He invited Sheila to the ceremony, and as she watched him cross the stage, his grin as wide as the Cuyahoga, she thought of the boy with the duct-taped sneakers and the community that had lifted them both. Her small act of kindness had stitched a new tapestry, one of hope, love, and unbreakable bonds. In a neighborhood of grit and grace, Sheila's story was a quiet miracle, proof that a single thread could mend a world.